I stood in my living room, the air so thick with tension it felt like I was breathing through a veil, staring at 3 pairs of eyes that seemed to see right through me, right into the parts of myself I'd kept locked away for years. My neighbors, Clara, Elise, and Nora, sat on my couch, their presence overwhelming, like a storm gathering just before it breaks, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. I'd always thought of them as friendly, distant faces, the kind you wave to across the street without a second thought. But that night, something had shifted, something I couldn't pin down but could feel in my bones. Their smiles were too sharp, their voices too soft, like they were holding secrets I wasn't meant to know, secrets that made my skin prickle and my heart race. "We just want to talk," Clara had said when they knocked on my door, her gaze lingering a beat too long, her dark eyes catching the dim light in a way that made my stomach twist. But this wasn't about borrowing sugar or neighborhood gossip. This was something else, something forbidden, something that made my conscience scream even as my curiosity whispered to lean in closer. I tried to laugh it off, to keep things light, to act like the guy I'd always told myself I was, but the words slipped out poorly out before I could stop them. "All 3 at once? I can't do that." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with implications I hadn't meant to invite, and I felt my heart pounding as I realized I'd stepped into something I couldn't walk back from. What did they want from me? Why did their eyes hold such quiet intensity, like they were waiting for me to crack open and spill everything I'd kept hidden? And why did I feel like I was betraying something, or someone, just by standing there? I'd always prided myself on being the good guy, the one who kept boundaries clear, who never crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But that night, with the weight of their gazes pinning me in place, I felt the ground shifting beneath me, like the world I'd carefully built was starting to crack. I wasn't sure if I was the prey or the one about to cross a line I'd never come back from. Have you ever been in a moment where every choice feels like a trap, where you know, deep down, that whatever you say or do will change everything forever? That's where I was, caught in a web of their eyes, my thoughts spiraling into places I didn't want to go. I wanted to run, to slam the door shut on whatever this was, but my feet stayed rooted to the floor. Because part of me, God help me, wanted to know what would happen next. And that's the part that scared me the most, the part that kept me awake long after they left, wondering if I was still the man I thought I was or someone else entirely. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. I'd moved into this quiet cul-de-sac 6 months ago, a place where the houses sat so close together you could hear your neighbor's TV through the walls if you listened hard enough. I was the new guy, 32, single, and keeping to myself after a breakup that left me raw and wary of letting anyone too close. Clara lived to my left, a painter with a laugh that carried across the yard like a melody you couldn't forget. Elise, to my right, was a therapist, always watching the world with this calm, knowing look that made you feel like she already understood your secrets. And Nora, across the street, was a writer, always scribbling in her notebook, her eyes catching mine whenever I passed by, like she was trying to read something I hadn't said out loud. They were friendly, sure, small talk about the weather, a wave when I mowed the lawn, but I never thought much of it. I wasn't looking for anything more than a nod and a smile, not after everything I'd been through. My ex had left scars, not the kind you see but the kind you feel, and I'd built walls to keep that kind of pain out for good. But over time, things started to feel different, like the air between us was charged with something I couldn't name. Clara would linger when she dropped off mis-delivered mail, her paint-stained fingers brushing mine for a second longer than necessary, her smile warm but curious, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Elise would ask me questions about my life, simple things, like how my day was, but her voice was so gentle, so inviting, it felt like she was peeling back my defenses one layer at a time. And Nora, God, Nora, she'd catch me outside at dusk, her words laced with a quiet intensity that made me feel exposed, like she was writing my life into one of her stories without my permission. I told myself I was imagining it, that they were just being neighborly, that I was projecting my own loneliness onto their kindness. But there was this undercurrent, this pull I couldn't shake, like a tide tugging at me when I wasn't looking. It was in the way they'd laugh together at block parties, their glances darting toward me like I was part of some unspoken conversation they were having without me. I'd catch myself wondering about them, about Clara's wild, carefree energy, about Elisa's steady calm, about Nora's quiet mystery, more than I should, more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, something that stirred a longing I'd buried after my ex, a longing I'd sworn I'd never let myself feel again. That night, they showed up unannounced, and everything changed. I'd just gotten home from work, still in my button-up, the day's exhaustion clinging to me like damp clothes. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Clara standing there, her dark hair loose, her smile almost too warm, like it was hiding something sharp beneath it. "Can we come in?" she asked, and before I could answer, Elise and Nora were there too, their presence filling the doorway like they belonged there. I let them in, my mind scrambling for a reason. Maybe it was about the neighborhood watch or some HOA nonsense, but the way they moved told me it was something else. Clara sat too close on the couch, her knee brushing mine as she leaned forward. Elisa's steady gaze held me like a spotlight, calm but unrelenting. And Nora's fingers traced the armrest absently, her eyes flicking to mine with a weight that made my chest tighten. They didn't say much at first, just small talk that felt like a prelude to something heavier, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I tried to keep up, cracking jokes, pouring drinks, but my mind was racing, my pulse loud in my ears. Why were they all here? What did they want? And why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from falling? I'd always been good at keeping people at arm's length, a skill I'd honed after my ex tore through my life like a hurricane. I'd sworn off anything that felt too complicated, too risky, anything that could pull me back into that kind of chaos. But sitting there, with their eyes on me, I felt something stir, a curiosity, a longing I hadn't let myself feel in years, not since the nights I'd spent wondering where I went wrong with her. It wasn't just about them. It was about me, about what I was capable of if I let my guard down for even a moment. I pushed the thought away, but it clung to me, heavy and undeniable, like a shadow I couldn't outrun. "So," I said, my voice rougher than I meant, trying to break the tension that was choking the room. "What's this about?" That's when Clara leaned forward, her voice low, almost a whisper, and said, "We've been watching you, you know." My stomach dropped, not because of her words but because of the way Elise and Nora nodded, their faces soft but serious, like they'd all agreed on something I was only just beginning to understand. It wasn't a casual comment. It was a door swinging open, and I wasn't sure I wanted to see what was on the other side. The air in the room turned heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks, the kind where you can feel the electricity crackling in your skin. Clara's words, "We've been watching you," hung there, sharp and heavy, and I couldn't tell if they were a confession, a challenge, or something else entirely. My mouth went dry, and I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the weight of it. "What, like I'm some kind of neighborhood mystery?" I said, but my voice sounded thin, unsteady, like I was trying to convince myself more than them. Elise tilted her head, her eyes soft but piercing, like she could see the thoughts I wasn't saying, the ones I didn't even want to admit to myself. "You're not what you seem," she said quietly, her voice like a hand brushing against something fragile inside me. "You keep to yourself, but there's something restless about you, something you don't let anyone see." Nora didn't speak, just watched me, her pen tapping softly against her notebook, slow and deliberate, like she was writing me into one of her stories, capturing every flicker of doubt in my eyes. I shifted in my chair, my heart thudding so loud I was sure they could hear it. Restless? What did that even mean? I'd been careful, guarded, ever since I moved here, ever since my ex left me with nothing but regrets and a distrust of my own heart. I didn't let people in, not after the way trust had burned me, not after the nights I'd spent picking up the pieces of myself. But now, with the three of them sitting there, their presence like a tide pulling me under, I felt exposed, like they'd seen something I'd hidden even from myself. "I'm just a guy," I said, my voice sharper than I meant, an edge of defensiveness creeping in. "Work, home, repeat. Nothing special." Clara smiled, But it wasn't reassuring. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd already lost a game you didn't know you were playing. "That's what makes it interesting," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. "You're so contained, so careful. But we see it. The way you look at us when you think we're not watching." My breath caught in my throat, a cold jolt of doubt running through me. Had I looked at them? Maybe I had. Clara's laugh, bright and wild, was hard to ignore. Elisa's calm intensity seemed to pull the truth out of me without a word. Nora's quiet mystery made me wonder what she saw when she looked at me. But I'd never acted on it, never crossed that line. I wasn't that guy. Or was I? The doubt was cold and sharp, slicing through the walls I'd built, making me question everything I thought I knew about myself. "You're reading too much into things," I said, but the words felt hollow, like I was trying to convince myself as much as them. They were too close now, their presence filling the room, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. Clara leaned forward again, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes locked on mine. "We're not here to judge you," she said, her words soft but heavy, like they were meant to sink into me. "We just want to know who you really are." That's when it happened, the moment I lost control. Their voices had started to overlap, each one pressing closer, their questions digging into places I'd kept locked away. "What do you want when no one's watching?" Elise asked, her voice so gentle it felt like a betrayal of my defenses. "What keeps you up at night?" Nora added, her eyes locked on mine, unblinking, like she could see the answer before I spoke it. It was too much, the weight of their attention, the way they seemed to know things I hadn't even admitted to myself. My heart was racing, my thoughts a tangled mess of fear and something I didn't want to name. I stood up, my hands raised like I could push the moment away, push them away, push myself back into the safety of who I was supposed to be. "All three at once?" I blurted out, my voice raw and unsteady. "I can't do that." The words hung in the air, clumsy and heavy, like a confession I hadn't meant to make. Their expressions shifted. Clara's smile faltered, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Elisa's gaze narrowed, like she was studying me, searching for the truth. Nora's pen froze mid-tap, her face unreadable but her eyes burning into me. I hadn't meant it like that. Or had I? The silence stretched, thick with unspoken accusations, and my throat felt tight, like I was choking on my own words. What did they think I meant? What did I think I meant? The truth was, I didn't know, and that scared me more than anything. Part of me wanted to run, to lock the door and pretend this night never happened, to go back to the safe, quiet life I'd built. But another part, the part I'd buried deep, the part I'd sworn I'd never let out, wanted to stay, to see how far this could go, to find out what was on the other side of this moment. It was wrong, wasn't it? They were my neighbors, women with their own lives, their own secrets. Women I barely knew beyond a wave or a passing chat. But the way they looked at me, like they saw something I couldn't, made me wonder if I'd been lying to myself all along, if the man I thought I was had been a mask I wore to keep the world at bay. Clara broke the silence first, her voice soft, almost kind, but with an edge that made my pulse jump. "You're scared," she said, not unkindly, like she was stating a fact we both knew. "That's okay. We all are." Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. They felt like a trap, like she was daring me to admit something I wasn't ready to face, something I wasn't sure I could survive. Elise leaned back, her hands folded in her lap, her voice steady as ever. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "But you can't keep running from yourself forever." Her words hit me like a punch. Not because they were harsh but because they were true, and I hated how true they were. Nora still hadn't spoken, but her eyes were on me, unblinking, relentless, like she was waiting for me to crack, to spill every secret I'd ever kept. I wanted to scream that I wasn't running, that I was fine, that I didn't owe them anything, not my thoughts, not my feelings, not the truth I wasn't even sure I knew. But the words wouldn't come, stuck in my throat like shards of glass. Because deep down, I knew they were right. There was something restless in me, something I'd ignored for too long, something that had been clawing its way to the surface ever since I moved here, maybe even before. And now, with them sitting there, their presence like a mirror I couldn't look away from, it was breaking free, and I didn't know how to stop it. The rest of the night was a blur, like a dream you can't quite shake when you wake up. They didn't push, didn't demand answers, but their presence was enough to keep the questions alive, burning in the air between us. Every glance, every pause, felt like a challenge, a quiet demand for me to face myself. I kept thinking about my ex, about the promises I'd made to myself after she left, how I'd sworn to stay safe, to avoid anything that felt like a risk, anything that could hurt like that again. I'd built a life around those promises, a quiet, contained life where nothing could touch me. But this wasn't about them, not really, it was about me, about the parts of myself I'd locked away, the parts that stirred when Clara laughed, when Elise spoke, when Nora watched me like I was a story she needed to tell. The guilt was there, sharp and familiar, cutting through me every time I let my thoughts wander too far. But so was something else, something dangerous, something that felt like freedom, like the first deep breath after years underwater. I didn't know what they wanted, not exactly, but I was starting to understand what I wanted, and that scared me more than anything. Because wanting something, anything, meant risking everything, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to survive another fall. The days after that night were a haze, like I was moving through my life underwater, every sound muffled, every thought heavy and slow. I couldn't look at my neighbors the same way anymore, couldn't see them as just friendly faces across the street. Clara's wave from her porch felt like a secret we both knew but didn't say, her smile carrying a weight it hadn't before. Elise's nod when I passed her on the sidewalk was no longer just polite, it was knowing, like she could see the storm in my head and was waiting for me to admit it. And Nora, God, Nora, her eyes seemed to follow me everywhere, like she was still writing me into her story, piecing together the parts of me I didn't want anyone to see. I told myself to forget it, to go back to my routine, work, home, repeat, the safe rhythm I'd built to keep the world at bay. But the memory of that night clung to me, heavy and unshakable, like a shadow that moved with me no matter how fast I ran. I'd lie awake at night, replaying their words, their looks, the way the air had felt too thick to breathe, too charged with something I couldn't name. "We've been watching you." What did that mean? Were they playing with me, testing me, pulling me into some kind of game I didn't understand? Or was it something deeper, something real, something I didn't want to name because naming it would make it real? I started noticing things I hadn't before, things that made my heart race and my conscience scream. The way Clara's paint-stained fingers lingered on her coffee mug when she invited me over for a neighborly chat. Her eyes searching mine like she was looking for something I wasn't ready to give. The way Elise asked about my day, her voice so calm and steady it made my secrets feel safe with her, like I could tell her everything and she'd understand. The way Nora's notebook seemed to appear whenever I was around, her pen moving in slow, deliberate strokes, like she was capturing pieces of me I didn't even know I was showing. It wasn't just them, it was me, the way I reacted, the way I couldn't stop thinking about them, about what they'd said, about what they'd seen. I was hyperaware, caught in this strange, silent dance where every glance felt like a step towards something I couldn't control, something I wasn't sure I wanted to control. I hated it. I hated how it made me feel, alive and guilty and terrified all at once, like I was waking up from a long sleep and didn't know where I was. One evening, Clara showed up at my door with a bottle of wine, her smile easy but her eyes sharp, like she knew exactly what she was doing. "Thought you could use a break," she said, holding up the bottle like an offering, but her gaze felt like a challenge. I let her in, telling myself it was just a drink, just a neighbor being friendly, nothing more. But the way she sat on my couch, her legs tucked under her, the way her laugh was just a little too soft, it felt like a continuation of that night, like the conversation had never really ended. "You're so quiet," she said, swirling her glass, her eyes flicking to mine over the rim of the wine. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I wanted to tell her to leave, to stop looking at me like that, to keep this simple and safe, but instead I heard myself say, "I don't know what you want from me." My voice was raw, almost desperate, and her smile faded, just for a moment, before she leaned closer. Maybe we just want you, system, to stop hiding, she said, her voice soft but deliberate, like she was peeling back a layer of me I wasn't ready to show. Hiding? From what? From them? From myself? The question hit me like a quiet blade, slicing through the defenses I'd spent years building. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that I wasn't hiding anything, but the words stuck in my throat, tangled with the truth I wasn't ready to face. Clara's gaze held mine, steady and unyielding, like she could see the war raging inside me, between the man I'd convinced myself I was and the man I was afraid I might be. Elise was different, her approach softer but no less disarming. One morning she caught me outside, her therapist's calm wrapping around me like a blanket, soothing and dangerous all at once. "You seem tense," she said, her voice so gentle it almost hurt to hear it, like she was touching a wound I didn't know I had. "Want to talk?" I didn't, not really, but I found myself nodding, following her to her porch, sitting in the quiet morning air. She didn't push, didn't pry, just let the silence sit between us, heavy with everything I wasn't saying. And in that silence I felt it, the weight of all the things I'd kept buried, the thoughts I'd pushed down for so long they felt like strangers. "I'm not who you think I am," I told her, my voice barely above a whisper, raw and unsteady. She tilted her head, her eyes soft but unrelenting, like she could see right through me. "Then who are you?" she asked, her voice so calm it made my chest ache. I didn't have an answer, not one I was ready to give, not one I was sure I even knew. Her question lingered, echoing in my mind long after I left her porch, a quiet challenge I couldn't shake. Nora was the hardest, the one who got under my skin the deepest. She didn't come to me, she waited, patient and relentless, like she knew I'd come to her eventually. I'd see her across the street, sitting on her steps, her notebook open, her gaze steady and piercing, like she was writing my life in those pages, seeing things I wasn't ready to show. One night, I couldn't take it anymore, the weight of her eyes, the way she seemed to know me without a word. I crossed the street, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break free, and stood in front of her, my voice sharper than I meant. "What are you writing?" I asked, the question spilling out like a confession. She looked up, her eyes calm but cutting, like she'd been expecting me. "You," she said simply, her voice soft but sure. "I'm writing you." I laughed, but it sounded hollow, like a lie I was telling myself. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking on the word. She closed her notebook, her fingers lingering on the cover, deliberate and slow. "Because you're a story that hasn't been told yet," she said. "And I think you're ready to tell it." Her words hit me like a quiet storm, tearing through the walls I'd built around myself, exposing the restlessness I'd buried deep. I wasn't ready, not for her words, not for her gaze, not for the truth she seemed to see so clearly. I didn't want to be a story, didn't want to be seen, not like that, not so completely. But they saw me, Clara with her warmth, Elise with her quiet understanding, Nora with her relentless curiosity. And the more they saw, the more I felt myself unraveling, thread by thread, until I wasn't sure who I was anymore. I started questioning everything, every piece of the life I'd built, every promise I'd made to myself after my ex left me broken. Was I really the good guy I thought I was, the one who kept the world at a safe distance? Or was there something else in me, something I'd buried after the pain of being too open, too vulnerable, something that was waking up now, stirred by their gazes, their words, their presence? I didn't want them, not like that, not in any way that crossed the lines I'd drawn so carefully, but the thought was there, creeping in like a shadow, dark and persistent. It wasn't just about them as individuals. It was about what they represented, what they pulled out of me: freedom, risk, the chance to feel something again, even if it was wrong, even if it scared me to death. The guilt was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on me every time I let my thoughts wander too far. I'd think about my ex, about the promises I'd made to myself, to stay safe, to avoid anything that could hurt like that again, to keep my heart locked away where no one could touch it. But Clara, Elise, and Nora, they weren't her, weren't trying to hurt me, weren't trying to break me. They were just there, pulling at something I'd buried so deep I'd forgotten it was there, something that felt like a stranger now, something that made me feel alive and terrified in equal measure. I started avoiding them, taking the long way home, keeping my blinds closed, trying to outrun the tension they'd stirred in me. But it didn't help. It was in me now, not just in their glances or their words, but in the quiet spaces of my own mind, in the moments when I was alone with my thoughts. I'd catch myself wondering what it would be like to let go, to cross that line, to see what was on the other side of this restless, aching feeling. And every time I did, the guilt would crash over me like a wave, reminding me of who I was supposed to be, the man I'd convinced myself I was, steady, safe, untouchable. One night, I saw them together, Clara, Elise, and Nora, standing on Clara's porch, laughing under the soft glow of the streetlight, their voices carrying across the quiet street like a song I couldn't quite hear. I watched from my window, my heart heavy with something I couldn't name, something that felt like longing and fear all at once. They weren't looking at me, weren't beckoning me over, but I felt it, the pull, the invitation that didn't need words, the possibility of something I wasn't sure I could handle. I could have gone out there, joined them, let whatever this was unfold, let myself fall into the unknown. But I didn't move. I stayed where I was, my hand gripping the curtain, my breath uneven, my heart pounding like it was trying to break free. Because in that moment, I realized it wasn't about them, not really. It was about me, about the parts of myself I was too afraid to face, the parts they'd seen so clearly. The restlessness they spoke of, the longing I'd buried, it was still there, waiting, whispering in the quiet moments, demanding to be heard. But I wasn't ready to listen, not yet, maybe not ever. I turned away from the window, the weight of that choice settling over me like a quiet ache, a dull pain that lingered in my chest. I'd said I couldn't do it, all three at once, or maybe any of it, and I meant it, or at least I thought I did. But the words felt hollow now, like a lie I told myself to stay safe, to keep the world at a distance, to protect the fragile pieces of myself I'd worked so hard to hold together. They'd seen me, truly seen me, and I'd run from it, not because they were wrong, but because they were right. I was restless, I was hiding, and I didn't know how to stop, didn't know how to be the man they seemed to think I was. Have you ever stood at the edge of something and turned back, knowing you'd wonder about it forever? That's where I am now, caught in the space between who I am and who I might have been, a space filled with questions I'm not sure I can answer. I don't know if I made the right choice that night, if staying safe was worth the ache of what could have been. Maybe I never will. But I want to know, would you have walked away, kept the walls up, kept the world out? Or would you have crossed that line, just to see what was on the other side, just to feel something real, even if it hurt? Let me know in the comments. And if this story hit you, if it made you feel that quiet ache of what could have been, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the stories we don't tell are the ones that haunt us the most, the ones that keep us up at night, wondering who we really are.